Welcome, everyone. This is Recovery Dharma. My name is Julia. I'm one of the facilitators of the Spokane Sangha. And I'd like to set the intention today with this beautiful sentiment of metta. This one was painted by our wonderful friend Michelle. And this one reads, May you step over the threshold between knowing and uncertainty with an open heart. May you step over the threshold between knowing and uncertainty with an open heart. That is a perfect sentiment for us to continue the conversation of duality. That's what we've been focusing on for the month of April, looking at our propensity to put things in either or categories. We're either knowing or we're uncertain. We're either right or we're wrong. Something is either good or it's bad. We're either selfish or we're selfless. And the reality is that we're always some combination of both. And it's really important in practice that we understand these two pairs of opposites, and so that we can experience them fully. When we lean toward being selfish, there is a lot to learn there. And by learning what are the conditions of our selfishness, we actually move away from that towards something a little bit more selfless. When we are in the posture of being selfless, we might consider that a really positive thing. However, what we have learned and what we've studied is something called empathetic distress or toxic altruism, where we're so selfless and we're so giving that we burn ourselves out and we start acting on resentment toward the very people and communities that we're trying to serve. So even selflessness can have its negativities. And there's a lot to learn from that. And then we come back. And this is why the Buddha emphasized the middle way. It's this fluid kind of place where we're always in motion, learning and opening up. So today, what I thought I would share with you is a story from my youth, actually. And I don't often share stories about me personally, but this one is worth sharing with you all today. So I just invite you to sit back and enjoy the ride. So, friends, I want to bring you back to when I was a young woman. I was in my 20s, and I was raised in a Catholic home, a very devout, beautiful Catholic home. And I had a very positive experience with the Catholic Church, and I was quite devoted to it, and I cherished many of its practices. And in my early 20s, was pursuing becoming some kind of lay monastic. I really wanted to have a life dedicated to service, but I did not want to become an ordained nun. I really just wanted to have a devotional practice that could be of service in some way. And then as a few years went by and I was really pursuing that, I realized that there was not going to be a place for me in this practice any longer, as a woman especially. And it was at that time that I encountered the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh. And that changed my life, and that changed my course. And I knew that I would have to leave the church. And so I met with a priest and asked him to help me sever my relationship with this practice in a respectful way and a wise way. I knew that it was going to be very painful to my parents. I knew they were going to have a feeling of betrayal. I knew there was going to be a period of time where they weren't going to understand. And so I needed some support in how to hold their emotional upheaval. And as I was going through that work, my eldest sister invited me to be a godmother to her son. She was a practicing Catholic. It felt like a way to keep me back into this practice. And so I said, no, I can't be a godmother to your son because I cannot stand in the sanctuary of this church and vow to raise this kid Catholic. I won't do it. It compromises my integrity. And she begged me, and so I finally said, well, listen, I'll talk to this priest, and in my practice of leaving the church, I'll see if I can find a way to stand up there and make a vow in this practice in front of my family that feels aligned and true and honest. And so after several weeks of lengthy conversations, I was able to do that. And I felt really good about it. And I did end up leaving this church. And on the day that I finally kind of made it solid, this priest invited me to receive the sacrament of reconciliation, which in the Catholic faith is what people would call confession, and a blessing. Now, this is where I want us to pause in the story, because the Catholic practice of seeking forgiveness and confession it can be really beautiful because it's private. It's not about getting down in front of a whole congregation and confessing the ways that you have missed the mark, which is what the word sin means. To be off the mark, to not get it quite right. That particular practice in Protestant expressions of Christianity has really framed seeking forgiveness in shame and guilt. You stand before a group of people, you confess your sin, you're forgiven. However, I experience that people rarely actually feel forgiven because they themselves have not had enough time of quiet, private contemplation to fully understand the conditions that allowed them to be wayward, let alone understand the conditions enough to learn from the misstep, the mistake. And the Buddhist practice follows a little bit more along the lines of a Catholic practice, where the Buddhist practice of seeking forgiveness, working with regret, working with mistakes, is incredibly private. It is a quiet contemplative practice. It's usually done in community, but everybody in silent meditation around the full moon. And it is a time for honest, deep looking, the vipassana practice of looking deeply at one's errors, taking a look at the conditions of that, taking a wise understanding of the karma involved, the consequences, looking at unskillful action, wise action, and determining if amends are necessary. Looking at the conditions of what that would mean. And then taking the time to forgive oneself by making a conscious, determined decision to do better next time, to aspire to make a different choice based on what we've learned. Beautiful, beautiful practice. In traditional programs, there are a lot of people who feel like they have to confess when they've had a recurrence of symptoms. There are places where you go and you receive a token that might indicate to the community that you're back at day one. And these can be both empowering for some person, but they can also be a source of deep internalized humiliation. So we have to be willing to look at ourselves as a unique individual that says, wait a minute, what works for me? What's going to motivate me to do something different? What's going to motivate me to mature and act more wisely and more skillfully? For me, as a young person, being punished, being humiliated, was the last thing that was going to motivate me. So as I sat with this priest in the sacrament of reconciliation, there was a little inner teenager that was just rolling my eyes like, ugh, I hate everything about this. I hate this prayer that's beforehand. So I was leaving the church and I said, I hate this prayer. I don't want to say this prayer. I hate this preface. I can't stand calling you Father, all of it. So this priest was so gentle with me and he said, Julia, just tell me what's on your heart. So I did. And it was lovely. And then I was getting ready for my penance. In the Catholic practice, it's often to say rosaries and to say prayers repeatedly. As a kid, I always thought that was ridiculous. I didn't realize that it's all about creating contemplative space. It's all about focusing the mind on saying the same prayer over and over to reduce the chatter and to just keep the mind focused on something sacred. So I was waiting to hear how many Hail Marys I was going to have to recite, how many Our Fathers and Glory Bees. I was waiting for the 5 rosaries that I would have to say. And this priest totally surprised me and he said to me, Julia, this is your penance. I want you to go out and buy 3 bouquets of flowers. But they cannot be pre-made. You have to go to a florist and you have to pick out all of the flowers yourself individually. And you have to make these bouquets. And the first bouquet I want you to give to somebody that you really care about. Somebody who inspires you, somebody who really encourages you, somebody who loves you and who you also love. And the second bouquet is I want you to give it to a complete stranger. And just give it to them. Just say, this is for you with my blessing. And the third bouquet, I want you to keep for yourself. And I want you to spend time with each of those flowers and look at them deeply. Touch them, examine them. And I want you to contemplate, in his words, a God, in my words, the divine awe that could create, that could have all the conditions to create something so beautiful. And then he said something to me that I repeat to this day, which is, and just take time to marvel at the fact that you are so well loved. That was my punishment and my blessing. Beautiful duality coming together. beautiful reminders that as I make mistakes, I am so well loved. As I hit the nail on the head, I am so well loved. Love is a limitless quality, as is compassion and joy, the joy of those flowers. And then, of course, the practice of equanimity, the ability to see myself as someone who is deeply flawed and divine perfection at the same time. And to see that in everyone and everything. I left the church that day. I have not returned to that practice. And I have since devoted my practice entirely to the principles of sati, of mindfulness. And one of the most extraordinary expressions of mindfulness for me has been able to bring it to the community of recovery and support. And one of the things that I'd like to impart here today, as we reimagine what recovery is, and as we are reimagining how we are recovering ourselves, is the way we treat recurrences as something we need not confess. We need not pile on humiliation, guilt, and shame, but instead to take a quiet moment, a sacred moment, to posture in noble strength, to take that sense of defeat and bring it a deep breath into the belly and breathe upward noble strength and say, I am here to learn from my mistakes. I am here to understand where I have missed the mark. I aspire to do better, wiser, and I aspire to use my regrets, my unskillfulness, my confusion and ignorance as opportunities to mature my mind, my thoughts, to detach myself from limiting stories, and to open myself to my Buddha nature. I invite everyone to gather a bouquet of flowers for yourselves sometime this week, or to notice a bouquet of flowers and to take a moment to really marvel at them. Have an awe moment and know that you have been divinely created out of a wellspring of limitless love, and you are its expression exactly as you are. Breathing in, I smile to myself. Breathing out, I smile to you. Breathing in, I smile to all of us, Buddhas to be. Alrighty, I think that's it. Let's go ahead and end our practice with a dedication of merit. I invite you to assume a noble posture, strong back, soft belly. If you're sitting in a chair, friends, lean toward the edge of your seat so that you can really feel your body supported at the level of your pelvis. Your belly is soft, but you're strong in your back. You've got a spine. Takes spine to recover. It takes spine to be honest. And the word that I'd like to offer you instead of confession or even reconciliation or any of that, it's Pema Chodron's word, which I love. And this is that sometimes we need to ventilate. Ventilate a regret, ventilate a mistake. And what she's talking about is owning our errors, but creating space around them so that we can see them more clearly. As opposed to expressing our errors and turning them into weapons so we can continue to beat ourselves to a pulp. We are a disservice to ourselves and to the holiness of life when we resist our own magnificence. In our community, we have friends whose loved ones are dying or have died. And at the time of their death, they were received in the embrace of love, the same embrace that brought them into birth. Breathe that in. The love of life is present the moment you have your first screaming exhale, and the love of life will be there to receive your final sigh. And in between, may we all aspire to lean toward the light, toward the goodness and holiness of life, to dispel misery, suffering, darkness. Thank you for your beautiful practice, friends. We'll see you tomorrow. Namaste.